The movie starts with a conversation between Edwin Layton and Isoroku Yamamoto in 1937 Tokyo. Layton says that Japan can't win a war against America, but Yamamoto interjects with that they can't win a long war. We then transition to 4 years later with Richard Dick Best landing a plane on an aircraft carrier without the flaps and the engine stalled as practice for the future.
Boom! The Japanese start the attack on Pearl Harbor and completely catch the Americans by utter surprise, sinking 4 battleships and damaging many more ships. Admiral Halsey receives intel that the Japanese either strike from the north or south of Pearl Harbor, asking a guess on the location of the Japanese fleet. Richard and the squadron fly from the USS Enterprise to the location where Halsey guessed the fleet was, find nothing there, and have to ditch their payload and fly back to the Enterprise.
We see Chester Nimitz get promoted to Commander-in-Chief Pacific Fleet by direct order of Franklin Roosevelt. While this is happening, Yamamoto is starting to plan out the Navy's attack on Midway. After Nimitz arrives at Pearl Harbor, he assigns Layton as intelligence to gather whereabouts on the Japanese fleet and their plans. Nimitz then sends a strike group to attack the Marshall Islands as a morale boost to the US troops. Richard and James Murray destroy an airfield, sending out bombers and heavy fighters in the raid. Plus, they shoot down 2 Japanese fighters.
Back on the Enterprise, Japanese bombers find and attempt to bomb the Enterprise, but due to Bruno Gaido making a brave play on a plane's rear gun, no real damage is done to the ship. It's now in 1942. The USS Hornet meets the Enterprise out at sea while carrying a strange cargo. 16 B-25 US Army bombers on our flight deck with the Enterprise as an escort. All of the B-25s take off and successfully bomb Japan's mainland, providing a crucial boost in morale for the US and a shaking in the belief that Japan's mainland was impregnable. Most of the raiders are able to crash land in China and make it back, but the Japanese commit genocide of many Chinese civilians to give info on the whereabouts of the raiders. Halsey's fleet is then ordered to go to the Coral Sea as support to the ships already there, but arrive too late and to a scene of vast destruction, with the USS Lexington sunk and the USS Yorktown suffering heavy damage.
Layton informs Nimitz that the intel team intercepted bits and pieces of messages from the Japanese. They gathered enough intel to figure out the Japanese were planning something devious on Midway, but had to convince Washington DC to not keep Enterprise near the Coral Sea. This decisive moment was shown with Washington intercepting Japanese messages, saying that the target is out of fresh water, and that Midway, accidentally, sent out an unencrypted transmission saying that their water plant was broken, even though it really wasn't. Afterwards, they interpreted that
the Japanese will attack on the morning of June 4th from the northwest at a bearing of 325 degrees. They will be sighted 175 miles from Midway at 0700 local time.
And the first Japanese carriers hit. Through intense offense and defense by both the US and the Japanese, many bombers and carriers take to the bottom of the sea. Navigating through enemy anti-air shots, Richard Best successfully bombs both the Akagi and the Hiryu, 2 Japanese carriers. We then cut to Layton and his intel team, who intercept a message stating that the Japanese are retreating. After this huge victory, it doesn't seem Best is going to make it back, when suddenly we see a plane enter view without its flaps and the engine stalled. He barely lands it as everyone on deck cheers, celebrating the huge accomplishment of everyone's sacrifices, bravery, and camaraderie throughout the battles leading up and during the Battle of Midway.
Throughout the movie, we see our main characters strengthen their friendships against their common enemy, the Japanese, which took the life of their friends, their brothers at arms, at Pearl Harbor. For Richard Best and Clarence Dickinson, revenge is what drove them. They fought to avenge one of their best friends, Roy Pierce. Best sacrificed his lungs to successfully defeat the Japanese, while Bruno Gaido, an aviation third-class machinist, sacrificed his own life. More than that, many brave unnamed men gave their life for the US's victory in the war. All of the camaraderie and sacrifices these men shared eventually led to the outstanding victory for the US at the Battle of Midway. This goes for both the movie and the real events at Midway.
Midway was mostly accurate, with some inaccuracies sprinkled throughout the film. For example, the Douglas TBD Devastator used to carry out strikes on the Japanese carriers at the Battle of Midway couldn't be equipped with bombs due to the lack of bomb racks, plus some other Hollywood exaggerations like the hammerhead stall used by Dick Best to escape the pursuing Japanese fighter. Overall, the movie was pretty accurate.
Not only was it mostly accurate, the movie showed us how important the Battle of Midway was for the US. With one destroyed and one heavily damaged carrier at the Battle of the Coral Sea, the Japanese were in prime position to attack Midway and use it as the perfect staging ground to attack Hawaii and the West Coast.
Usually, most World War II films focus only on the soldiers fighting the war itself, and while Midway isn't totally innocent from that, it does provide some glimpses about the families of the soldiers' reaction to the war and the reality about their loved ones maybe being dead and having no way of knowing.
Wait, Zoink Scoob, the bomb Pearl Harbor.
So, what are your thoughts on Midway?
そんなだから、みんなに嫌われるんですよ。
That's better. I feel this movie was very touching. The emotional bonds of the characters make you think about what you would do if you were in this situation. It's definitely a movie worth watching if you are interested in history or World War II. The downsides of the movie, however, are the confusing transitions between the Japanese, Americans, and the families of the soldiers, and the bad CGI you can plainly see in some scenes.
I think Midway is a perfectly fine film that you should watch if you're interested in the US Navy battling the Japanese in the Pacific. It's a niche genre of movies, but if you like watching people blow stuff up in war films, you'll probably have a fun time turning your brain off a bit and enjoying the battle scenes. Overall, give it a try. It has its goals that it's trying to reach in the telling of the Battle of Midway and the events that led up to it. I think it tells them well enough.